Saturday morning cartoons were awesome. From the 1960s through the 1990s, we kicked off each weekend in a frenzy of animation that is unmatched today.
But were these shows actually any good? Join us as we dig into the history of your favorite and not so favorite Saturday morning cartoons, look at the good, the bad, and the ugly of each one, and determine if our nostalgia matches the reality when it comes to these tunes.
So stay in your PJs, grab a bowl of cereal, and settle in. I'm John.
And I'm Robert.
And this is Toon Talk.
So John.
Yeah, Robert.
You know how sitcoms are, you'll have a character, whether it's a main character or like the goofy sidekick who has
the comic relief guy.
Yeah, it has the catchphrase that everybody like, oh, they kind of wait for it to be said, and then you hear either the live action or I should say the live studio audience or the canned laughter always reacts to it, like, oh, yeah, it's so funny. When you think of catchphrases, what jumps to your mind? What's your favorite catchphrase?
Giddy up. Kramer on Seinfeld. I remember nice. Giddy up.
Nice. Yeah. I thought you might say, hello, Newman.
Hello, Jerry.
See, I always loved Kiss My Grits from Alice, you know, the waitress.
Oh, yeah.
Say, tell everybody.
Yeah. Ring up, dingy.
Yeah, all that sass.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's like, you know, there's like the Dynamite and What You Talk About, Willis.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Classics.
But how about in cartoons? Do you have any favorite from cartoons?
Well, What's Up, Doc? Everyone remembers that.
What's Up, Doc?
Yeah.
I always loved Heavens to Murgatroyd.
Oh,
Heavens to Murgatroyd.
Yeah.
From stage left.
Yeah, from Snagglepuss. Yeah. Yeah.
But I think the
Captain Caveman. That was a good one too.
I think the most. Yeah, this is like I know going in, this is like a potential just like rabbit hole that we get stuck in.
Sure.
So before we start falling, I want to just make sure that we talk about one of the most iconic catchphrases from cartoons and actually from primetime television, which was Yabba-Dabba-Doo.
Yeah, Yabba-Dabba-Doo.
An iconic catchphrase that comes from a groundbreaking television show, a groundbreaking cartoon in the Flintstones, which is going to be a really fun discussion for this episode.
It's more like a rock breaking. Yeah.
Ooh.
Too soon. Too corny.
That's a little of a rocky transition, but it's okay. So I mean, the Flintstones is this Hanna-Barbera show that would debut as the first original animated series to air on primetime television, and it led to a number of different series and specials that would basically star the same characters over the next 60 years. So the story of the Flintstones begins not 2.4 billion years ago in the Stone Age, like the cartoon.
Which you're led to believe.
Yes, well, even though it's somewhat modern,
as
they would say. It actually begins in the very late 50s through one man named John H. Mitchell, who was an executive with Screen Gems. Now, Screen Gems was a cartoon distributor at the time, and they worked actually really closely with Hanna-Barbera Productions.
Okay.
And so he suggested that they create, that Hanna-Barbera create an animated series that could air during prime time that would appeal to both kids and adults.
Sure.
Thinking as a distributor, hey, there's money to be made in this. Can you guys make it happen? Now, Bill Hanna and Joseph Barbera, now at this point, they are aware that their biggest cartoon going at that time was the Huckleberry Hound show. And 40% of that audience was adult, which is actually pretty significant.
Well, yeah, we see a lot of cartoons add humor that only adults get.
Yes.
But the attraction for the kids is the animation and the looniness.
Yeah, and this is a series that's running on television. Either the cartoons ran in the afternoons, the mornings. They didn't show prime time when it's basically when ideally adults weren't around. It was just the kids.
Yeah.
But a significant percentage of this audience for the show is adults. So we know adults are interested. So let's explore it. And so they thought, look, if we have the right combination, we can tell a good character work and good story. We can make this happen. And so they bandied ideas around and thought, well, we should make it a sitcom, a family-based sitcom, because that's what's popular. Throughout the 50s, the biggest shows were, you had Ozzie and Harriet, you had Leave It to Beaver, Lassie, things that were families could sit around and watch. I Love Lucy. Together. Yes. Yeah. So they let's do this. Let's take that tact and we'll move forward. And of course, at the same time, you look at there's westerns all over the place. It's family sitcoms and westerns, but they went with the family sitcom instead of the western, which is probably for the best.
Sure, yeah,
for multiple reasons. But so they looked at different characters and settings to try and make this thing work, and they They looked at, should we make them hillbillies? Should we make them pilgrims? Should we make them Native Americans? Which thankfully they didn't.
Right.
And then, I mean, they even thought, well, maybe we should put it in ancient Rome, which, interestingly enough, Hanna-Barbera would actually do that 17 years later with the Roman holidays. Vastly different and much shorter lived than the Flintstones, but they would eventually go there.
Right.
But, in the end, they settled on a prehistoric setting. And that was helped by a doodle by illustrator Don Gordon, who just had a picture of these two men in like animal skins,
fur things, fur lederhosen.
And sitting next to them is a record player that has a bird is playing it with its beak
as the needle.
And everybody's like, that's hilarious. That's like a really funny gag. So like, well, you have that bird is the element that's cemented. Yes, we should do this prehistoric because there's so much possibility for humor and like these sight gags and putting like modern sensibilities in ancient times is actually we could really work with it.
Which confuses me.
Yes.
Yeah. Because they're cavemen, but they have recorded music.
And television and phones and
right, but that's what makes it hilarious.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like you don't. Yeah, there's a lot of unexpected.
What if cavemen had television? What would it be on?
Well, and the fact that they just kind of pick up rocks and move them around without any problem. Nothing's really that heavy for them.
No, but they were stronger than us.
So development begins in 1959, and they originally came up with the name the Flagstones. They're like, let's work with that. And the concept, it moves along and they find out that it's pulling heavily an influence from the Honeymooners. Yeah. So throughout the 50s, the Honeymooners was a very popular skit on the Jackie Gleason show, became its own show. I think in 1955, ran 39 episodes, went away, went back to being a skit. But so throughout the 50s, it's there.
And Jackie Gleason was one of my favorite.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just funny in everything he does.
Yeah, I mean, it's Jackie Gleason's baby, and it became it's an icon from that time.
Sure,
and, everybody knows the Honeymooners. So
speak of catchphrases, to the moon,
bang, zoom to the moon, Alice.
Yes.
This is extremely popular. So that's an influence. Of course, it doesn't hurt that Bill Hanna looks at that as pretty much the only sitcom that he ever watched.
Oh, really?
At that time, he's like, the only one that interested him was the
Honeymooners.
The Honeymooners. So, like, well, it's kind of hard not to have influence when the boss is like, that's really funny.
Yeah.
Do that.
Do that because that makes the boss laugh.
So, when you're trying to do something in primetime that hasn't been done before, it does make sense to lean into something that's been proven to work and been very popular.
Yeah.
And then, the fact that the boss enjoys it.
Sure. An imitation is the sincerest form of flattery.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you also get to keep your job.
Most people believe that.
Yeah. The lawyers don't.
Put a pin in that. Yeah. Coming back. So they created a 2-minute clip that features the four main characters that would appear in the show. You have Fred Flintstone and his wife Wilma, and then you have Barney Rubble and his wife Betty. And it's a segment that ultimately would appear in the first episode of where they put in a swimming pool and they all the voices are different. They're not the final voices. It featured Dawes Butler, who's both Fred and Barney's voice, Jean Vanderpyle as Wilma, and then June Foray as Barney's wife Betty. I mean, ultimately, Vanderpyle would remain a permanent cast member. Yeah, but it was just a test animation to throw out something that they
a concept.
Yeah, something that they could use to pitch. One of the problems that they ran across was the name, the Flagstones. Yeah, they kind of deemed it was too close to the name of High and Lois Flagston. So at that time, they were the main characters in Dick Brown's daily newspaper comic strip, High and Lois, which is popular at the time. It ran.
Oh, really?
Years later.
I remember that card. Yeah, I remember that strip.
It was around in newspapers for decades.
Forever, yeah.
And at the time, it was, fairly,
it was popular.
Yeah, sure. Comic strip and newspaper, everybody knew those.
Right.
So, nobody knows anymore.
No, no, clearly.
So they pivoted and they're like, well, how about we call it the Gladstones? And nobody really, they lived with it for a while, like, that doesn't work. And ultimately they settled on the Flintstones. Everybody's like, okay, that works. Let's,
Well, Firestone was taken.
Yeah. And
and it's the Flintstones. There's a T in there.
Yes,
Flintstones. Yeah, a lot of people just gloss over the T and say Flintstones.
And it works even better when it's Flintstone.
Right.
I mean, it's just made it more logical.
Yeah.
Especially even more logical than Gladstone.
Yeah.
Which is like the Great Gladstone performing tonight.
Yes. The illusions for the eyes. Yeah.
So Joseph Barbera takes this animated clip and he heads off to New York and he's going to like, all right, I'm going to sell this thing. We're going to find a network or sponsor or something and we're going to make this thing happen.
Yeah.
And he commits weeks to this. Like, I'm going to do come hell or high water over the 6-week period. I'm walking away with this thing sold.
Yeah.
He goes to NBC. They reject it. He then goes to CBS. Rejected again. He spends, through the 6, actually it may have been somewhere between 6 to 8 weeks. He's in New York and he's just like going to sponsors. Like, hey, we're going to do this. Can we get you back behind this when we can? No. Everybody just
not interested.
Cold shutting him down. So he gets to his final day of his New York trip. He's like, all right, I got one final meeting. It's with ABC. All right, I got my 90-minute presentation. It's probably going to end. And if it does, this thing, it's not even going to go back with me. It's going to go in the trash and we're done. So he starts his 90-minute presentation. ABC. So ABC at this time, think of it like, you have the 3 networks. NBC and CBS are the juggernauts. And then there's ABC who's there. They're like the RC Cola of the networks at the time. They're like, they're not the most popular.
They're the also ran.
They're just like, they're there. They're there if you want them. They're there.
They're there if you can't find anything else, here's a cola for you.
They're always there if you need them, but nobody's running to them first. So.
Right.
Within the first 15 minutes of Barbera's pitch, they jump and they're like, yes, let's do this. We want to do something different. We need to shake things up because nobody's watching.
Because nothing's working. Yeah.
And so they're in and they move it forward, and the Flintstones debuts on Friday evening, September 30th, 1960, at 7:30 p.m.
So prime time.
Prime time. First time an animated series would ever do that. And, it debuts, and the critics hate it. I mean, they hated it. This is not just...
it's like, there's another mistake.
There's ABC screwing it up again. No, It's like, this thing is terrible.
Really?
I mean, they're across the board. The critical complaints were that it wasn't funny. Mm-hmm. The stories were weak. I did see one that said it was inhabited by unpleasantly uncouth people. Somebody called it an inked disaster. And then, it had a laugh track that was panned. It was just bad. Critics hated it. Of course, it's viewers, not critics, that really determine. That they paid the bills,
right?
And the viewers loved it. It was a rating smash.
Yeah.
And ultimately it was that gamble on making them a modern Stone Age family, like not just telling a Stone Age family. It's putting all these modern twists, like the TV, the record player.
Yeah.
That those were the things that pushed it over the top that people really like, because they like seeing the name Mr. Slate, like, oh, that's clever, playing this, using up, but they're in the town of Bedrock, all these things that are
all these little Stone Age,
and then you see this crane that
is a brontosaurus.
It's a brontosaurus in the quarry, like Fred's operating the crane and it's a brontosaurus, or like the shower is actually an elephant,
right? And their lawnmower is a snapping turtle, eating the grass.
It's just all these little just clever sight gags,
right?
That people really really reacted to, and so it was a hit. And the other thing that was a big appeal was that it was that touch that appeal to the honeymooners crowd,
right?
Was what made the other thing is like, oh yeah, this is a great spin on this,
this other adult show.
This working class dynamic that everybody that they liked.
That works.
Oh yeah, this is really funny too. This is great. So,
well, you even see that in some of the shows of today. Like the King of Queens was a spin on that. You got this bumbling husband who really means well, and he's always trying to keep stuff from his wife because he's afraid of getting in trouble. And of course, his wife outsmarts him and knows what he's up to the whole time, and the husband just has to admit defeat.
Yeah, you're just always getting into into trouble, into schemes and things like, we're going to make this better. And then,
well, even Curb Your Enthusiasm is like that, Yeah, so it's a concept that still works.
Yeah, it's time tested at this point.
Right.
At that time, it was new to really take that idea and run with it. of course, that Honeymooners influence didn't sit well with everyone. And by everyone, I particularly mean Jackie Gleason.
Sure, they stole his character.
Yeah, so understandably protective of his his creation. So Gleason's like, he starts exploring with his lawyers, suing Hanna-Barbera to pull Flintstones off the air, and like, that's my intellectual property, get rid of him.
Right.
In the end, his friends kind of like, come on,
yeah,
you're overreacting to this. I mean, it's an homage. They're not, it's not, and at that time, the Honeymooners aren't even on TV at this point. So it's not like it's a direct competition.
Right.
And so they kind of, they talk him off the ledge, so to speak. And Gleason actually himself would eventually say, he's like, in the end, I didn't want to be known as the man who took Fred Flintstone off the air. Yeah. So
good move.
Yeah, so he did take it as his friend suggested, as, like, all right. Yeah. It's appeal to his ego a little bit, and like, okay, yeah, they like my stuff so much that they're gonna do it. So he's like, all right, let's move on. And it dies there, thankfully.
Right.
Otherwise, the Flintstones died there.
Right, and we were blessed with the rest of the Flintstones.
Yes, so things would have changed drastically at that point. So, during its first. So, you're trying to fund a network. They also find sponsors. For the first 2.5 seasons, the show was sponsored by Winston Cigarettes.
Oh, classic.
So during the show, you would get to a commercial break, and instead of just like the regular commercials, you'd see Fred walk into the store and buy a pack of Winston cigarettes, and they would talk about how smooth and they have to recite the catchphrase and the jingle and all that stuff. And it was, 2.5 seasons of Fred and Barney lighting them up and enjoying them, finding flavor country in the Stone Age. And it's funny because once you get to season 3, the Flintstones, and we'll talk about this. They decide to add a baby into the mix. Yeah. So it's now truly a family sitcom. And to the point where there's like a multiple episode arc, which is again a first. One episode to the leading to the next, telling the story of Wilma's pregnancy. It was 9 weeks long of her announcing that she was being pregnant, and then the baby being born. As that storyline is progressing, the writing was on the wall pretty quick from everybody. Like, we can't really do Winston cigarettes.
You can't smoke around the baby
anymore. So that Winston's kind of pulled out their sponsorship, and they were quickly replaced by Welch's. Like the jelly and juice,
grape juice,
and Welch's would remain the sponsor for the rest of the show, and actually it proved to be pretty lucrative for them too. Actually, it paid off really well. It was
a good decision for Welch's,
Yes, it worked out well. So the Flintstones would run for 6 seasons and ending in 1966, but of course they were not gone.
No,
and not gone long at all. In August of that year, so just months later, a feature film showed up in the theaters called The Man from Flint, which was actually a spy spoof film, featuring Fred as a kind of like a bumbling spy.
Sure.
And then I believe 1 month after that, NBC had swooped in and decided to put the rights onto Saturday mornings, which brings it to us. So, so Saturday mornings,
is where we saw it
from the fall of 1966 through the spring of 1970. So it ran on TV for 10 years.
Wow.
The original 6 seasons, and then another 4 in syndication, at least on Sunday morning and Saturday mornings.
Right.
So, of course, then it would continue on in syndication for years, for decades.
70s and 80s.
They would spin off 10 separate cartoons of various, all set in Bedrock, and where Fred and Barney are cops.
Right.
Then there's the Great Shmoo, and then there's Pebbles and Bam Bam as teenagers. There's like all these different, and the Flintstone kids, and like the 80s when everybody had to be a kids.
Yeah.
Up until in 2021, they announced that another animation series is going to come out called Bedrock, which was originally slated for the end of 2023 for this year. However, with writers and acting strikes, that seems to have been delayed. There has not been a new year announced, but that would mark the 10th spinoff then.
Wow.
That's not to even include the other animated movies that they put out into small features. Also 2 live action movies that came out. So it's the Flintstones remain, a animation powerhouse.
Sure.
Like everybody knows them.
Well, they were a huge part of television culture.
Yes. Yeah. And one of the, I mean, they had multiple firsts. They were the first primetime animated series, the first animated series that focused on one set of characters, especially for 30 minutes, which is
Right.
Yeah.
A lot.
The first animated show to show a married couple in the same bed.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So yeah, Ozzie
Interesting.
and Harriet showed live action, but animated
Had not.
The Flintstones was the first time that you can see that. The first time pregnancy, infertility, and adoption were all shown in cartoons.
Yep.
And there was one, like I've seen this a couple times, but nobody could confirm it. It was potentially the first cartoon to show continuity between episodes. Well, when you talk about the pregnancy arc of
the arc all
9
the way through.
episodes,
Yeah.
that everything else, like everything was standalone, but this was like, okay,
Yeah, those you have to watch in order.
Yeah, we're telling this long threaded story.
You can't have a baby and then all of a sudden there's no baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's pregnant. Then she's not
no,
pregnant.
she's not.
Then there's a baby. Then she's pregnant again.
Right.
And
Yeah, you got to watch them in order or you're confused.
so, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of firsts. And what part of what made the show so huge is ultimately the talent behind it, especially particularly the voice work and these long running characters are established because of the names behind them.
Yeah, and I mean, talk about an all-star cast. I mean, we've had other cartoons that have a lot of good people in them, but this one, I mean, Mel Blanc is in this as Barney Rubble. And Mel Blanc, if you've listened to our podcast at all, we haven't had a lot of Mel Blanc involved, but he's huge, especially with Warner Brothers. I mean, he did, and indulge me, I'm going to list a bunch of them here. He did the Warner Brothers Looney Tunes, Merry Melodies cartoons. He was Porky Pig, Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Elmer Fudd, Tweety Bird, Sylvester the Cat, Wile E. Coyote, the Roadrunner, Yosemite Sam, Sam the Sheepdog, Tez the Tasmanian Devil, Speedy Gonzales, Marvin the Martian, Foghorn Leghorn, Pepe Le Pew, Charlie the Dog, Block Jacques Shellac, Pussyfoot, Private Snafu. Those were all Mel Blanc. And then he went on further. Obviously, he's Barney Rubble in the Flintstones. I should have started with that. He's Barney Rubble. He also was Dino. He was Cosmo Spacely, Secret Squirrel, Captain Caveman, Speed Buggy, Wally Gator. He did some Tom and Jerry vocal effects. He would go on to become Toucan Sam for the Kellogg's Fruit Loop commercials, which I didn't know. I didn't know that was him. And he was Tweaky for Buck Rogers, and then he was Heathcliff in the 70s and 80s. So, I mean, he was known as the man of 1,000 voices, and he's in this. You know, you talk about Peter Cullen and Don Messick, and then you got Mel Blanc. I mean, these three are on my Mount Rushmore of voice actors.
Slacker.
Yeah. So, yeah, he's Barney Rubble. Alan Reed played Fred Flintstone, and he actually improvised the Yabba-Dabba-Doo. The script called for him to say Yahoo, and he said Yabba-Dabba-Doo. And like you said, that's one of those iconic catchphrases that everyone knows. Even if they weren't a fan of the show or never watched the show, people will say it just because they've heard it.
It's funny because where that improv comes from is he saw the Yahoo and he thought it made him think of the Brill Cream catchphrase from or the tagline when he was growing up. It was "A little dabble do ya."
Yeah.
And his mother used to say it in this. She used to be silly with it and say "Yabba-Dabba-Doo."
Yeah.
And so
funny.
So as he's looking at that, like
that.
he thought Yahoo doesn't really convey Fred's excitement in this scene, so he goes over to Joseph Barbera and he's like, "Can I say this instead?" And Barbera's like, "Yeah, that's kind of funny. Let's try that."
Yeah.
And a catchphrase is born. And
yeah, you mentioned Flintstones, and the person you're talking to is going to pull that out.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure. Jean Vanderpyle was Wilma Flintstone. She was also Pebbles and didn't do a lot of other work as voiceover actor. She did do mostly acting, but not actual voice work. The only other voice work I found was as Rosie the Robot from the Jetsons, and a couple of characters in Top Cat and the McGilla Gorilla Show. Okay. She had a voice on there, but not clearly obvious as much as Mel Blanc.
Sure. It's part of that Hanna-Barbera stable, but not as
prolific. Like one of the people we talk about, like, hey, you're walking down the hall, hey, come here and read this, you know. B. Benaderet, Betty Rubble, for 112 episodes. She had a great career in radio and television. She was on Fibber, McGee, and Molly, My Favorite Husband, with Lucille Ball. She was on the Jack Benny Show. So did a lot of TV, did a lot of voiceovers in various roles for Orson Welles in his radio productions. She was a regular on Campbell Playhouse. She was on the George Burns Show. She was on the George Burns Show with Gracie Allen. And because of her role as Blanche on those shows, she wasn't allowed to accept the part of Ethel Mertz in I Love Lucy. Oh. So she could have been in I Love Lucy, but she was in contract with George Burns. It was offered to her by Lucille Ball, actually, and she had to turn it down because she was already under contract. She was in a lot of other Warner Brothers cartoons, usually females, and those are the ones that Mel Blanc couldn't do. He couldn't do the female voice. So she was Tweety's owner, Granny, and worked as Tweety Pie and the Academy Award-winning animation short featuring Tweety and Sylvester the Siamese Cat. So she's got quite a voiceover career and an acting career as well. On my Mount Rushmore, obviously Bam Bam Rubble came along, and that's Don Messick. And if you need an animal voice, and Bam Bam, let's be honest, he was kind of an animal. If you needed an animal voice, you went and got Don Messick. He was Scooby-Doo, Boo Boo, and Yogi. We know all the things that he's done. So he was Bam Bam. John Stevenson was Mr. Slate. He was on television really early in its infancy in the early 1950s. He was the commercial announcer on I Love Lucy. When they would read the commercials live, when everything was recorded live, he would read the radio. He would read the commercial.
Oh, interesting.
That's Mr. Slate. Jerry Johnson was Betty Rubble, and she was the second voice of Betty, actually, beyond B. Benaderet. And she did like 52 episodes, so she did quite a few.
The last 2 seasons. Yeah. There's a noticeable change when you go from season 4
you
to
can hear
5,
it. Yeah. It's the same character, but you can tell the voice is different. Hal Smith was the voice of the announcer. He was, I only included him. He didn't do a ton of other things, but he had an interesting role outside of Flintstones. He was the owl in Winnie the Pooh.
Oh.
He played Mr. Owl.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then also Barney Rubble had a second voice. Dawes Butler pitch hit as Barney Rubble for 19 episodes because the original actor, Mel Blanc, was in a car accident, and Dawes Butler took over for him for 19 seasons. Dawes Butler is up there too. He's done so many things: Yogi Bear, Huckleberry Hound, Quick Draw McGraw, Snagglepuss, Jinx the Cat. All these. He had a lot of voices in the Jetsons as well, Cogswell Coggs and Elroy Jetson. Also provided the voice for many long-running commercial characters as Snap from Snap, Crackle, and Pop from the Rice Krispies, and he was Captain Crunch, which is cool. I always loved Captain Crunch because I have an affinity for pirate stories, and he was the voice of Captain Crunch, and I didn't know that. And then one of my favorite actors played one of my least favorite characters on Flintstones, the Great Gazoo. The Great Gazoo was just,
there's lots to say about the Great Gazoo.
Yeah, the Great Gazoo was a gag that was like, it was like they jumped the shark with the Great Gazoo. It's like, we got this alien who's kind of a genie character, and he grants them wishes so he can go home, but not when they really need him,
Yeah, and it's... I've got a lot to say about
But the only thing that saves Great Gazoo for me is he was voiced by Harvey Korman.
Yes.
Harvey Korman is a genius, and he makes me laugh no matter what he's doing. He's just funny. Obviously, you know him mostly from the Carol Burnett show, but he also did a lot of Mel Brooks films, and Mel Brooks films including Blazing Saddles and History of the World Part 1. It's part of Mel Brooks' catalog. Yeah. You think of Mel Brooks, you think of Harvey Korman too. So that saved the Great Gazoo for me. Otherwise, I just couldn't stand that character.
Oh, yeah.
And those episodes are the worst out of all of them. Those are on the bottom because of the Great Gazoo. But now that I know it was Harvey Korman, now I laugh at the Great Gazoo because, I know he's being a smart aleck just like Harvey Korman.
I still can't laugh at him. That didn't work, but
so a really well-rounded cast, not a big cast, but wow, you got some heavy hitters.
Yeah, you have icons.
You got Dawes Butler,
the animation world.
You got Mel Blanc, you got Don Messick. Wow.
Yeah, and
this is a cool cast.
Yeah, it's so well done. It makes a huge difference too. And I will even say for the 19 episodes where Dawes Butler stepped in, he did a great job.
Yeah,
it's pretty. It's not overly noticeable as compared to where Betty
was a complete switch.
Yeah, her voice was distinctly different. She wasn't trying and match it. Where Dawes Butler's clearly trying to
trying to be Barney.
Yeah, how do we maintain this voice?
Yeah, and maintain this laugh and stuff. Nowadays with AI, they could have just made him say whatever you wanted him to say, but that's what causes the actors strike, right? So maybe we shouldn't have suggested that, but I thought the voice acting in this was really, really good, and obviously because they had great actors doing this.
So before we sat down and started watching these again, what did you remember of the Flintstones, whether as a kid or as an adult? What are your recollections?
Almost any person my age can sing the Flintstones theme song. Absolutely. Everyone knows the words to that. I mean, it's even parodied in one of my favorite Thanksgiving films, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, where they sing the Flintstones on the bus because Steve Martin wants to sing 3 coins in a fountain, and no one knows the words to that, but they know the words to the Flintstones, But I remember watching this, and I don't remember a lot of the stories. And you brought that up the other day at lunch. Like, you remember watching this, but you don't remember any of it.
I swear I've probably seen every one of these episodes at least once, if not twice, at a minimum. Yeah, growing up. And I mean, I remember watching the Flintstones all the time. There's not one single plot that I remember. Like, oh, I remember this episode. I don't. I remember the characters. I remember locations. I remember the guest stars. I remember Dripper, the trained seal who shows up at the end of. I couldn't remember that episode other than that's right. There's that seal, and he looks like Barney in his scuba outfit. Right. That's it.
Yeah, I just remember the scenery. Like I remember what the house looked like. I remember what their cars looked like. I remember what the Brontosaurus crane looked like. I remember the characters. I don't remember, what they did that was funny or what their main gig was. I remember the water buffalo hats that they wore, but I don't remember them ever going to a water buffalo meeting or anything like that. I just remember those visuals, but I don't remember any of the gags, so to speak, or clearly any of the plot lines. I don't remember any of that. Yeah, so watching it back, I'm like, oh, this is all new to me.
I'm the same way. It was a lot of just it's like watching, knowing all those elements are there, and you're like, oh yeah, I remember. Yeah, like I said, the water buffalo, the Loyal Order water buffalo, the. Like Anne Margaret when she shows up. Oh, I remember. I didn't know who Anne Margaret was when I was a kid, but I still, recognized. I remember that character being here. But
and Elizabeth Montgomery and Dick York were on there. Yeah, from Bewitched.
Well, and that's one of the things that surprised me going back and watching it now as an adult is that I didn't realize. So I always thought that when The Simpsons came on, The Simpsons were the first animated show that really dug into pop culture and just kind of spoofed everything that was going on. Sure. The Flintstones did that pretty much for 4 of the 6 seasons. Right. And pretty
30
heavily.
years before.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of nods even to contemporary television shows that I'd never even heard of and never would have known at that time, or even now I've never heard of them. But, different types of shows that were on. I mean, and more notable, they spoof Candid Camera, and they have nods to Perry Mason, right? Dr. No, The House on Haunted Hill, the Addams Family. They have this whole episode with the Gruesomes, and the Gruesomes. Who, if you recognize, I don't know if you watched that one or you recognize, that's basically the model for the Creepleys from
the Creepleys from Life Olympics.
Yeah, it's not the same characters, but they just
very close.
Yeah, modeled them after the Gruesomes. Yeah. Yeah, and then I mentioned Anne Margaret. So they had Anne Margaret, who actually voiced her own character. Tony Curtis came in. Oh yeah, Tony Curtis. They did Knock on Rock Hudson. Yep. Cary Grant, or Cary Granite is what they called
Cary Granite. Yeah.
They had Ed Sullivan. The band the Beau Brummels at that time actually came on and sang their hit song of the time, and it was just I mean, I didn't realize, and it actually makes me appreciate the show more,
how they pulled that off,
how hip they were in terms of just kind of poking the elbow at pop culture.
Sure. Yeah. Well, you imagine gathering around the TV set in the 50s, go, oh, we got to watch it this week because Anne Margaret is going to be on. Anne Margaret's going to be on the Flintstones.
Yeah, it was interesting, and I mean the way I look at it. So the show. So I actually did sit down and plowed through all 6 seasons, every single episode.
I did not. I think I did about 70%.
I wish I had done that.
You watched all? How many were there?
166.
Oh,
it's a lot of episodes. I mean, in the end, it's good, but it did help me this kind of break out the Flintstones into phases. There's clear phases in the way this show develops. Yeah, you have the first season and into the second season where it's clear that the direct Honeymooners influence, where Fred he's a jerk. Yeah. And he's he's overtly obnoxious. He's borderline unlikable at times.
Right. Like, and he's always trying to scam Barney out of something.
Yeah, dragging Barney into everything. And then it's just like, I mean, he's
keeping things from his wife.
And unpleasant to Wilma, to the point like, oh, this is a little uncomfortable. But yeah, I mean, so it takes them into season 2 where they soften his edge.
Yeah.
And they seem to really find their footing, and the show really starts to hum. Right. Like there's a clear shift. Voice. Yeah. Like kind of like early into season 2, we're like, all right, it really starts to move along, and it kind of like, I would think like that prime Flintstones is right there. And then you get into the season 3 with the introduction of Pebbles, and you get this family focus. And so introducing a baby when they are at a peak, like the peak of their popularity at this point.
Introducing a whole new thing.
And they're doing, I mean, that's a somewhat bold choice. Like, all right, we're changing this.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're trying to be like proactive about, how do we keep things fresh?
Right.
And I mean, that's
a good way to do it.
Yeah. And originally, it's funny. There's an interesting story. So originally, the baby is going to be a boy, and then Joseph Barbera gets a phone call from the head of merchandising, and he just wants to confirm the rumor that the baby was going to be added. And he's like, "Is it going to be a boy or a girl?" And Barbera's like, "Well, it's what else? It'll be a boy. It'll be a chip off the old rock." And the merchandising guy says, "Well, that's too bad. If it was a girl, we could have made a hell of a deal." So Barbera replies, "Oh, it's a girl." And they turn around, and within the first 3 months, they sell 3 million Pebbles dolls.
Wow.
And they like, well, let's do it. Let's do it again. Yeah. Let's go ahead and add another baby.
Yeah.
So the Rebels need to have a baby. We need that symmetry between the Flintstones and the Rebels. So they start in early, like the first couple episodes of season 4. Bam Bam is introduced as he's adopted by the Rebels. Again, that's where like they're not having a kid, and then there's like an adoption struggle to it. It's actually, I mean, a struggle. It's it's resolved within 15 minutes of the episode.
It's conflict though.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, like it worked, and and they're able to then through season 3 and even into season 4 just kind of keep that, really find a new element with these stories and not feel like they're forcing anything, or it feels like it's like, all right, no, money grab here, money grab there. You get what I would call the 4th phase, which is, season, probably like early season 4 or, all the way through season 5. So it's like, you're balancing those phases 2 and 3, like those stories that really click when it's just like the 4 of them are really just Fred and Barney focused.
Yeah.
And then with the family ones, and some are hit or miss, but for the most part, it's still good. It still feels like the Flintstones. And then you get to season 6. And
you said that with bated breath.
Well, that's because it feels like they've run out of ideas. Uh-huh. It's like these conflict, these natural conflicts just aren't natural anymore, and it feels like they're struggling. And then they go ahead and add the Great Gazoo, and it's like this eternal struggle for fresh conflict ideas. Yeah, and they're just using the Great Gazoo
to create conflict.
Yeah, and he's so the idea for the character for the Great Gazoo is that he's this space alien who is banished to Earth from the future, from his planet in the future, sent back to prehistoric Earth because he created a doomsday device. He says unwillingly, and he's got to stay there until he can perform a good deed for somebody.
Yeah.
And of course, his introduction is like him, like the first thing you even said, like he just calls them dumb, calls them stupid. Like, what are you doing, dumb dumb?
Yes, that was good. He sounded like the Great Gazoo.
And it's
clear that that tells me the Flintstones are in the past.
Yes,
way in the past.
Yeah,
because he's come to Earth,
and they define it that way as like, oh, I've gone so far back in time.
Yeah, he's gone back in time, and it's before Earth has come up with any kind of technology. It's even close to anything the Great Gazoo would recognize. Right, and he's just bored with it.
And
he even has to tell them how to open his spaceship.
Yeah,
because he can't open it from the inside. He has to tell Fred, push that button and lift this lever. And get me out of here.
And one of I think where the struggle with the Gazoo, at least for the time, and why those episodes at times really started to fall apart, is because you're already asking this suspension of belief in your audience that a modern Stone Age family of Stone Age with modern elements.
Right.
Like, okay, we've accepted that. Now we're going to add a futuristic space element to this, and it's like, oh, come on.
Yeah.
It's a bridge too far, I think, for some of you. You're just kind of already playing fast and loose.
You got foot-pedaled cars, and now you got a flying saucer.
You're playing fast and loose with the term modern already, and now we're going to do this. But the issue that
my brother pointed that out to me, because I was asking him, like, why did the Flintstones have a Christmas episode? And so they're obviously before Christ, right? And he said, John, they're a modern Stone Age family. So then I'm starting to think they're in a cult, right? It's modern times, and it's like
M. Night Shyamalan's The Village.
Yes, exactly. It's like The Village, which I love, by the way. But like maybe they're choosing to live like this because they have media and they have lights and they have police and laws and they have jobs and paychecks and things they worry about and the radio and these things. But they live in a stone house, you know. So maybe they're just choosing to live like this.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Have doors, but they don't have windows.
Yeah.
They
well, they have windows, but there's nothing in them. There's holes. But they have
the window holes.
And they have a door that closes.
My favorite, and I don't know if they intended to do it or not, but season 4, episode 14, there's a scene where Fred goes up to like a guy's house, and he knocks on the window. There's no noise. You just see him actually like knock. And nothing happens, and then he just starts talking. There's no glass. He just starts talking to the person inside.
He started to knock. They haven't invented glass yet, but they have televisions.
Yeah.
So what's the television screen made of? I mean, someone's pressing records too.
You're like highly polished stone.
Yeah. They found some quartz somewhere and they polished it off. Maybe that's what Barney did at the quarry, because I never understood what Barney did.
Barney jumped from job to job.
Yeah.
He actually didn't work at the quarry for
He didn't work at the quarry?
No.
Yeah, see, I thought he did. Maybe,
yeah. I think at one point, by late season 4, season 5, he starts showing up.
Showing up at the quarry, yeah.
But I do need to finish one thing out, the Great Gazoo, that's my issue with the Great Gazoo and why I struggle with it so much. So the idea is that all these problems, these conflicts, he creates every single conflict, not just because he's trying to help them. It's just, he just creates them.
He creates it so he can solve it.
So in one episode, he just out of nowhere, he provides Fred with this car that they saw in the movie. Yeah. It's like a gangster car.
Right.
And Fred and Barney's like, no, we don't want this. You get rid of it. And he's like, oh, no, keep it. It's fine. I'll take it away. Fine. Like, okay, fine. We'll keep it. And then, of course, they get in trouble. They get, chased by gangsters.
Right. Which is hilarious.
Yeah.
There's 1920s gangsters chasing them around in prehistoric times. Yeah. Or their M. Night Shyamalan village.
So he's like the beast. Yeah. Great Gazoo is the beast.
The beast, yeah.
He also then, they go to the racetrack one time, and he decides to fix dinosaur races so that they think that he's going to tell them all the answers, and then he decides to screw them over.
Yeah.
And he tells them all the wrong ones, and they get they're being chased down by gangsters again. It's like, well, what lesson are you teaching when you're intentionally you choose to do this? He's
supposed to be doing good things to get back to where he belongs.
Yeah, and then
he doesn't want to go.
Then he's frustrated because he can't get home. I'm like, well,
it's your fault.
I think you really did create a doomsday device on purpose.
I think he is the doomsday device.
and then one more where he creates. So Fred and Barney, they want to go bowling, but they agreed to take their wives out to dinner, or to the opera or something it's to dinner.
Yeah.
And so Gazoo I'll just create a second version of each one of you. Fred can only say yes, 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 and Barney can only say no, no, no. Right. And for some reason, Fred and Barney okay, that works. And of course, mayhem ensues.
Yes.
And they didn't ask you for that; they just
agreed to it.
Yeah. And somehow he's still there.
Yeah.
Eventually he does help them, and he's able to go home. But it's too many episodes of the Great Gazoo.
Yeah, but I love Harvey Korman.
Yeah.
So if I look at it through that lens, he's kind of hilarious because I can see Harvey Korman doing this just to mess with them.
That's a pretty soft pass.
Yeah. I'll take it though.
It would have been better if you had the Great Gazoo and then you had his henchman who's played by Tim Conway.
Yes.
That would have been
that'd be hilarious.
Changes everything then.
Yeah. And then you replace Wilma with Carol Burnett once in a while. Yeah. Yeah, so to be straightforward with you, I hated the Great Gazoo when I'm like, these episodes suck, and I hate that guy, and he's just, he asked me earlier what I remember about the Flintstones. I remember hating that conflict that he always created. It was like uncomfortable for me. I didn't like it.
Right.
Because he was always putting them in trouble or putting them in danger, and I'm like, this is an evil character.
Yeah.
This is the bad guy.
And Fred's good enough at putting themselves into trouble.
Yeah, he can do that on his own. He doesn't need any extra help. But I just have to give a little bit of a nod to the genius of Harvey Korman, which made that character hateful. Yeah.
Intentionally or not. Yeah.
It's like some of the best actors in Hollywood are the bad guys. Yeah. Because they make you hate them. It's easy to make someone love you, but make someone hate you is a talent on its own.
This better be good. I was busy sleeping. Which apparently he did 23 hours
Wherever
a day.
He's from, they must need a lot of sleep. The days must be really short there, or very, very long.
Very long.
Yeah. We're talking about a 600-day year, a 3-day day.
But one other thing I wanted to touch on, too, is the opening and closing. So you mentioned Meet the Flintstones and the opening and closing credits. Yeah. So when the show first started, they actually had a different song called Rise and Shine.
Yeah.
And it showed Fred leaving work and doing errands around Bedrock. He stops, picks up a newspaper, he gets his dry cleaning, and then he ultimately goes home and settles in front of the TV. And then the end
Wilma
credits,
hands him his food as he goes to the recliner.
Yes. And Dino, jumps down onto the floor. And then the end credits then continue that continuity where it shows Fred getting ready for bed.
Yeah.
Excuse me. It shows Fred getting ready for bed before he ends up being locked out of the house by their saber-toothed cat.
Yeah.
Did
the cat ever have a name?
He had a name, Baby Puss.
Baby Puss.
He only showed up in 5 episodes total, outside of the credits. Yeah. But it aired, at that point, the show was airing in black and white. And so Dino is actually, when you see the cartoon now, he's blue.
Yeah.
But it didn't matter. Nobody saw him. He was just like, we don't need to change that because it's black and white.
Yeah.
And in 1962, after years of other networks showing color television, ABC found maybe we should do this newfangled color thing.
Right.
And they get Hanna-Barbera to go ahead and create a new
Dino.
Well, just a new opening sequence and song. So they
they change the whole thing.
So they write Meet the Flintstones.
Yeah.
And it happens to coincide with the introduction of Pebbles. So what you see is that Fred leaves work and he picks up the family and they go and they head to the drive-in theater.
If you order the brontosaurus ribs.
And eventually they actually add the Rubbles to it.
Yep.
So both families get in the car, pile in this car. And they go to
and they put Pebbles and Bam Bam on top of Dino.
On top of Dino's head so they can watch the drive-in movie.
Yeah. Well, and that's in the song, they say a page right out of history, which tells you, okay, they're in the past.
Yes.
But are they really? Or is it just they're a page, they're a throwback, they're a page right out of history? Yeah. Is that telling me they're early in the past, or they just live like they're in the past? I still don't know.
Yeah, they're watching projected movies on the screen.
Right. And they drove there.
With audio technology where they can where you can hear the movie.
Yeah, there was recorded music coming through a speaker that they hung on their car. But the speaker was like a conch shell.
Yeah.
But it had a cord. Yeah. So they didn't have Wi-Fi yet. They didn't have wireless technology.
Yeah, they were hardwired everywhere. But it's, throughout the 6th season, there are points where they swapped out the ending with the Meet the Flintstones with. So the first episode of season 6 has an episode where Fred dreams that Pebbles and Bam Bam as babies make a rock song. Have become hugely popular, singing their song "Open Up Your Heart and Let the Sun Shine In,"
and drumming on the turtlebacks.
And,
strumming a guitar made from a bird or something. What is it, a flamingo or something?
Sounds right. Yeah.
I can't remember exactly, but it had to be that kind of animal.
Yeah. So what they do is they take this clip of them singing in that episode and they put that over the end credits for a handful of episodes at the end.
That's where that came from.
Yeah, trying to make that a thing, I guess, and
kind of like a page out of the Archies.
Yeah. But so it's
setting them up for a
interesting.
spin-off, maybe.
Until they turn into teenagers.
Yeah.
That's how the opening credits kind of evolved over time.
Yeah,
and it was interesting. But now you just see Yeah.
Right.
Yabba-Dabba-Doo sliding down the back of the dinosaur and out to
the whistle goes and he's out of there.
Yeah, to the dulcet tones of Meet the Flintstones.
Right.
Yeah, kind of sets you up for the show.
For our listeners, the opening music we use on our podcast is Rise and Shine, which is the original theme from the Flintstones. And I didn't know that. You said, let's use this music. I'm like, okay, cool. I love it. It's cartoony music. And then I started watching back these Flintstone episodes. I'm like, oh, and I texted.
I know that?
I texted you. I'm like, the opening song sounds really familiar. Wink, wink. So if you go back to the beginning of the episode here and listen to that music, that was the original intro music for the Flintstones cartoon. Which is great because it, like the whistle and the cop sirens and stuff, makes sense when you watch the opening of the Flintstones because all that action actually happens.
Yes.
It's not just in the song randomly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because they established right off the bat that Bedrock has a population of 2,500 people. 2,500 people, but modern, like you think of like modern cities now, 2,500 people. That's not huge. There's not a lot. There's not a lot, but they have everything, every amenity. They have multiple banks. They have a theater.
It's the largest small town in the world.
They have, like different neighborhoods. They have
a drive-in
TV station.
Yeah,
everything.
Media.
Yeah, everything is there. Like multiple, like multi-level hotels.
Yes,
because that's when all the celebrities show up. They all like hide up in like the 8th floor of the hotels, and
social
they have
clubs.
A mall. Yeah, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So when is this set?
I don't know. I'm completely
They have
confused.
a mall.
Yeah. They have retail. Yeah. They have their trading goods. They have currency because they get paid, which I never see them get currency. So they must have had electronic deposit or automatic deposit, so it's frightfully confusing to me, because there are episodes, and some of my favorite episodes, they had one where, Fred loses his job at the quarry and gets a job as a bus driver. And they give him this route. And he's like, okay, I drive the bus. I pick these people up. I take them to school. And all the other bus drivers are like scared of what Fred's about to do. And it's all like they have PTSD, they're like wartime pilots that are confused about, oh, you don't want that. And they got the twitches and they're bouncing around the room and stuff.
How long did you drive that road? 4 days.
4 days. And the guy was just a mess. So, that made me feel like, okay, this is modern time because they're dealing with modern problems, and then they have the Indian Rockalus 500. Goggles McGee is his name. And so that makes me think it's like a near future, but a dystopian near future because they're doing things that we did in modern times, but with less technology. It's like they're trying to bring back auto racing with these stone cars with wooden wheels.
Post-apocalyptic.
Yeah, it's like a post-apocalyptic thing because they have modern things, but they work differently. We use a bird's beak as the needle on our phonograph, and we use turtle shells to communicate with each other, and we live in stone houses, but they have electricity. They've figured that out.
Yeah.
So that makes me think it's the near future and things have gone wrong, and they're trying to rebuild technology. Yeah, they've been pushed back to the Stone Age.
The horror.
Yeah, the horror. Yeah. So they're a modern. They've been put back to the Stone Age, but they're modern people.
Yeah.
But they don't know any better because they're back in the Stone Age. And then there's an episode where they have a time machine and they go to the World's Fair, 64 World's Fair in New York City, because you can see the sculptures in the background. You can clearly tell this is New York City. And you hear Fred talk about New York strips, and they're singing songs like When the Saints Go Marching In, which tell me, okay, this is cool. But then they go to the future and wind up in ancient Rome. So are they real? They're really in the past, because if the future is ancient Rome, they're really in the past. So then I'm convinced, okay, they really are a Stone Age family, because if ancient Rome and Columbus and medieval times, and even they go to 1776 Philadelphia and meet Benjamin Franklin, and they wind up at the World's Fair in the future, that means they're obviously ancient people. They're in the past. But then they meet the Great Gazoo, and he's from the way future, and he's coming back, and he said, I had to go all the way back in the past. So now I think the Flintstones are in the past. And then the episode I watched, I think it was the last episode, right? The long, long weekend where the Great Gazoo sends them to the future.
Second to last.
Second to last episode.
Oh, no. One of the last
It's
four
near the
episodes.
end.
Yeah, it's one of the last 4 or 5
near the
episodes,
end.
yes.
And he says, well, why don't you... I'll tell you what the future is going to be like. I'll send you there. And they go there like they're on a field trip, you know? And the people who they meet don't care that they're dressed in furs and don't have shoes on. And they don't seem amazed that they're flying around and going to Mars for the weekend and stuff. They're just walking around, hey, look, that's kind of cool. But you see all these other characters from the Jetsons, but they're like not the Jetsons, right? They're drawn exactly like George Jetson, but he's got a mustache, right? So that tells me, you know, there are theories out there that say the Jetsons and the Flintstones happened at the same time. And the Flintstones are the poor schmucks that got stuck on Earth, and the Jetsons were the ones that escaped Earth and now live in space colonies. But if the Great Gazoo sent them to the future to meet the Jetsons, that's clearly not at the same time.
Yeah.
I feel like that character in Princess Bride where he's trying to figure out which drink has the iodine powder in it. You know, I can clearly not choose the glass in front of me, but I can also at the same time clearly not choose the glasses in front of you. You know?
Well, clearly we can just blame all this confusion on the Gazoo. It's Great Gazoo. It's his fault.
Yeah. Oh. Oh.
Though I will immediately retract that because at one point in season 5 they put on a performance of Romeo and Juliet. There's no Gazoo around. It's just like, yeah. Wait, how do you know Shakespeare?
Right. I mean, I didn't learn Shakespeare till like 1984, right? And they knew it back when
before Shakespeare. So
before Shakespeare.
Maybe what we've done is just figure that Shakespeare actually really didn't write his stuff. It was written by the Rebels.
Written by Cro-Magnon man.
Yeah. The Flintstones and the Rebels wrote all that stuff. So.
Well, it's kind of like someone stealing the concept for a show from a show that's already on TV, like the Honeymooners. It's been happening for centuries. This isn't new, baby.
I did have one question, though, too. For a town that small, why is there so much crime?
Right.
There are criminals everywhere. Yes. Like every other episode, there's crooks. They're being chased by gangsters. It's like a constant.
People are setting up scams.
You only have 2,500 people in this town.
Yeah. You got to know who the bad guys are.
Apparently half of it's a criminal element.
So maybe they were all put on a prison planet. And these are the ones who just got, you know, they're in a prison colony. I mean, Fred's always trying to bend the law too. You know, he's always pulling these little scams. Maybe that's what's going on here.
Well, and that's funny too, because they're always trying to get like, well, we don't have enough money. So he quits his job. He like in some big, yells at Mr. Slade, like, I don't need this. And he takes off and he starts some new like startup business, or he buys a
drive-in
diner. They like all these different businesses. They all fail.
Right.
And Wilma basically goes back. He's like, oh, I can't go back to Mr. Slate. So Wilma just goes like, yeah, I already got your job for you. Yes. So Mr. Slate's extremely, I mean, either Fred must be really good at his job and is really underappreciated by Mr. Slate while he's there, or they just like nobody else can.
There's only 2,500 people. You got to come back.
We need a crane operator.
Yeah, there's only like 3 guys in town that can run the crane. One of them's a drunk. The other one's Flintstone. You know?
It's Flintstone or Rubble. They're the ones that are already unemployed at various points.
Right. Yeah. So. I think I hit something with the prison planet because they're doing hard labor. I mean, they're breaking rocks. And they wear the same clothes all the time.
Yeah.
You know. Oh, it's interesting. I never thought of it that way. I was so hung up on the past or future thing, but now I think they're just sentenced to hard labor somewhere.
In the past and in the
past
future.
and in the future. Yeah.
It's
prison planet.
It's like almost like a Superman planet where it's rotating so fast the time keeps changing on them.
Or it's bizarro. Yeah, I mean, there's so many things like it's obviously they're in the past because there's dinosaurs and all the Stone Age tropes and things, but it's in modern times as if they're in a cult because they have some modern conveniences, but they're choosing to live like this, or they're in the future because they're visited by spacemen and they celebrate Christmas and they know Shakespeare and all these things. But at the same time, they could be in the past because science fiction and trips to the moon are mentioned as something coming in the future. So they're pre-space age, at least, right?
When they meet Dracula and Frankenstein.
Yeah. And then when the Gazoo sends them to the Jetsons universe, they meet George Slate, the 80,000th. Is still running this company in space.
And somehow has a record of Fred Flintstone
in his
from
database.
10 billion BC.
So they had legitimate record collecting. So I give up. I'm sticking with the prison planet thing. Like they were banished to this place for several generations. You know, they're like the North Koreans do. You know, you go to a labor camp for 4 generations or something, and that's where they are.
Well, so who is it that determines what animals can be pets and what ones are appliances?
Yeah, because you know one of them's the phonograph, you know, and one is the garbage disposal. And
and they all have smart comments too, like, "Well, it's a living."
Yeah.
Or with the garbage can, it's like waste not, want not.
Right, he's a big pig that eats everything.
What was the one? I can't remember. It's like when they start up the grill, it's like a bird that he like squeezes his legs and he just blows air.
Fire, yeah.
And he's like, I do all the work around here and they get all the steaks.
Yeah.
I'm like, what bird is eating steak?
A velociraptor, maybe.
I was like, I took the job because I have a sweet tooth.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just like all these like funny, I mean, and they are kind of clever, and it's like how they fit them in, but it's just like these poor animals.
They're subservient, but not all of them, because some of them are beloved pets.
Yeah, some are pets, and then every once in a while they go out like the one with the bewitched characters. They go out and camping, and there's like wild animals out there that they're afraid of.
Yeah,
like well.
You operate a brontosaurus for a living, and you're afraid of what's in the trees. You have a saber-toothed tiger living in your house.
You have 2 dinosaurs, a dinosaur and a saber-toothed tiger that live in your house, but you're afraid.
You have a giant snapping turtle that you use as a mower. You've domesticated a giant snapping turtle.
You've got a woolly mammoth as your shower.
You're bathing in snot water. But you're afraid of what's knocking in the woods. Oh, I think that's what makes this cartoon so great.
Yeah. Well, and there you go. So what's on your list of good? What makes this what fits your good?
Well, you know, good. I'm always partial to the voice acting because the voices were great.
Yeah.
And they were truly acting. You know, it wasn't we've had some doozies. Just these people had no business being a voiceover actor. And these guys were great. I mean, some of the greats are in here, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I thought that the script writing, the monologues and the dialogue were awesome.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the longevity of the show speaks for itself that it's lasted this long, but it's very clever. The sight gags, the play on words that they do throughout the series. It's just like, and they do such a good job of leaning into that quote unquote modern aspect of it. It's just like really kind of having fun with it, and it just. You add to that clear Honeymooners influence where once they found their footing with it and they're like, okay, we don't have to be like this really combative, relationship between Fred and Wilma. It can be a little bit more. They have disagreements, but it's not.
Clearly, they love each other.
It's not brutal. It really kind of came into its own. You just kind of. Yeah, and I like how they leaned into contemporary pop culture too.
Sure,
that gives me that added level of appreciation that I didn't have before.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as an adult, I understand.
Yes.
Now. Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely.
As a kid watching it, I'm like, God, what? Yeah. It was just okay. Everyone does that.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
What about the bad?
The Great Gazoo.
I could have guessed the Great Gazoo.
The Great Gazoo and
you didn't like the Great Gazoo?
No. Great Gazoo and early Fred, the season 1 Fred.
Yeah, was a jerk.
Yeah,
he basically tried to scam his best friend Barney into building a pool for him. Right, that was the first episode, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
It was terrible.
Yeah,
he was totally taking advantage of his friend, but his friend outsmarted him.
Yeah, and he does it throughout the especially the first. Yeah, I mean throughout the series, but that first season, it's all just like how Yeah,
he tries to take Barney's helicopter invention away from him.
Yeah, he's a loudmouth braggart who's just really borderline unlikable. And the once they kind of softened him up, it made the series so much better. Yeah,
the bad for me was I couldn't understand the timeline. Like, where are these people? When are these people? I couldn't get it. And now I still don't. I'm even more confused now.
So did you have any ugly?
No, not really. I mean, there were the stereotypical gender roles with, Fred and Barney work and Betty and Wilma stay at home, which was a sign of the 50s, but not really overtly. I mean, those women ran the household. Yeah. Fred and Barney did what Wilma and Betty said they should do. So that was cool. I mean, those women stood up for themselves.
Yeah, I agree. That's what the ugly I had is like, and they offset it by having that trope of the women who are ultimately like the brains behind everything. They're smarter than the husbands.
Clearly,
they talk a lot. The men talk a big game, and then ultimately
the women outsmart them. Yeah, the women just just let them do what they're going to do, and we'll fix it later.
but again, and throughout the course of that series, every single one of them gets themselves into trouble, and then they help each other out.
Yeah,
one way or another.
Yeah, which is cool.
Yeah,
they're a family.
Yeah.
But
so, scale of 0 to 10. I know it's not a 0, so
it's not a 0. I really enjoyed the Flintstones, and like you said, the longevity of it, and they're ensconced in public culture even to this day, or into pop culture until this day. I mean, my kids have probably never seen a full episode of it, but they know who the Flintstones are. Just because they're everywhere, and they still sell vitamins by the bucket load.
They do.
To this day, and I really enjoyed it, and I haven't done this very often, but I gave it a 10 out of 10.
Wow.
Just because it's just fun.
Yeah.
And even my struggles with the timeline make it even more fun, just because of the ridiculousness of it.
It's an added challenge.
It is. Yeah.
It's mental gymnastics trying to watch the Flintstones.
What's wrong with John? He's very confused about the Flintstones.
He got such a glazed eye look on the TV. It's not that deep, is it?
He's taking notes.
John's so deep when he watches cartoons. He sees it at a different level.
Yeah.
I did not go with a 10. I appreciate so much of what the Flintstones is, but season 1 and season 6 are
not worth it.
Are rough enough that I put it at an 8.
Yeah.
I still really like it, and I really enjoyed watching it through. And like I said, I found like a new level of appreciation for some of it, but it's
It's because of the Great Gazoo.
Yeah, it's good, but I'm not going to sit back and watch 6 seasons of it straight through again.
No, you shouldn't.
No.
You'll be on a prison planet too.
And I will say, even going back, I have a hard time remembering plot lines for most of these shows still.
Sure. Even though I just
watched them all and like researched through it all, and I'm like, it's still not quite, still aren't quite clicking, but it doesn't mean I didn't enjoy watching it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I think we should follow up the modern Stone Age family with the family of the future for our next episode.
Oh, you're just messing with that timeline.
I am. Yeah, because I want to get to the bottom of that now, too.
When was the Jetsons?
When was the Jetsons? So I think we should watch the Jetsons.
I'm on board.
All right, we'll follow up the Flintstones with the Jetsons. That'll be super fun.
Sounds good.
Well, I hear, Mom, I think it's time for us to go outside. So that means cartoon time is over. I'm John.
I'm Robert.
And this is Toon Talk.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you want more Toon Talk, you can find us on Twitter @ToonTalkGuys.
Or if you've got questions, comments, or suggestions, you can email us at toontalkguys@gmail.com.